Justin Haskins is with me, and we're talking about propaganda wars and the things that are happening currently now that we pretty much predict in this book. But one other thing that hasn't happened yet, but usually doesn't happen, at least in the last year, until the last 1 or 2 days. It takes you about 2 days for a deep fake to circulate, and then it's exposed as a deep fake. All right? So prepare yourself for the October surprise of a deep fake. We'll tell you about it, where it's been done here in the last few months in just a minute. The election, this is from page 159. The election challenges ahead are daunting. We've already entered the era of election fraud. Out of the past 6 presidential elections, 3 have resulted in roughly half the country believing its candidate of choice was screwed to the benefit of the other half of America. If that trend continues, the United States will not survive very long. There are good reasons to worry as well. Many news outlets only provide viewers, listeners, and readers with what they want to hear, not well-established facts. Some government agencies, law enforcement, and courts have been weaponized to serve political purposes. Technological changes are occurring that will undoubtedly alter the way people think about elections. As I explained in Chapter 4, algorithms and artificial intelligence are dramatically changing the way we experience and think about the news. They are shaping our thoughts and our feelings, often in unhealthy ways that further detach people from reality. But when it comes to our elections, the most dangerous threat of all is the one that we are losing our ability to trust what we see in and hear. As noted in the previous chapter, deepfake images, audio, and video are reaching a level of sophistication that far surpasses anything we've seen before. Now, here's how the mainstream media is dealing with this. Over the weekend, Donald Trump released a picture of himself as a football player, okay, with, what is it, the Green Bay Packers? No, Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, okay. So the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this is clearly not him. If you look at his arms, he is quite ripped.
I don't know, Glenn.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's what the picture says, Glenn.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
Also, it's him currently in his 70s.
Yeah, right. It's ridiculous.
They don't employ any 70-year-old football players.
Okay. So this is what the mainstream media is pointing out as, well, that's a deep fake. That's not the kind of deep fake that you should worry about. That's not deep. That's just fake.
Yeah, just fake.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, when you see your favorite or most hated politician say or do something where you can't be sure it really is him or her, the uncertainty will grow, as it will in this election and the coming years. At some point, there is going to be a deep fake crisis, and it could spark severe economic or political instability. It's avoidable, but only if people soon understand the threats that we are faced with before it's too late. Americans also need to be better prepared to know how to tell the difference between truth and lies and to recognize the threats posed by large institutions and powerful politicians who benefit from the crisis, just as I outlined in Chapter 3. Okay. So then I go into, in this chapter of the book, I go into a couple of things that are happening right now that have happened in this election in America that are not game-changing, but very confusing. One of them happened in, I think, New Hampshire.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, New Hampshire. And it was very confusing, but it wasn't game-changing, and people caught it, thank God, in time. Now, this election is happening all over the Western world. There are more elections happening around the world than ever in human history this year. We're one of the last. So have deep fakes been used in the last year? Yes. Warning, usually in the last day or two, because there's not enough time to combat it. So right before everybody goes in for the final day, something is released on one of the candidates, and it shows them doing something or saying something. This actually happened in Chicago in 2023.
That's right. Yeah, there was a mayoral race there that was a really contentious race between a more socialistic candidate named Brandon Johnson, who nobody thought was going to win, and the establishment candidate, Paul Vallis. Mm-hmm. Right before one of the rounds of primary voting, a deepfake audio of Vallis came out, who's white. Brandon Johnson is African American. It's basically talking flippantly about back in his day, cops used to shoot people all the time and nobody cared.
Yeah, he said cops in my day would kill 17 or 18 people and nobody would even bat an eye.
That's right. And it supposedly came from this news source called Chicago Lakefront News. It was presented as a news story. And this happened right before the primary. Now, none of this was true. It was a deep-faked audio. None of it was real. But it circulated widely right before the election, and Brandon Johnson ended up doing a lot better than people thought. And then in subsequent voting, because they do multiple rounds there, subsequent voting, he ended up winning. And it surprised everybody. Now, Brandon Johnson was the anti-establishment socialist candidate, presented himself to the African-American community as, I'm going to represent you. And here you had audio of the other candidate saying, I don't care if black people get killed by cops. Now, we don't know, because there's no way of actually tracking the specific, correlation between this and the outcome of the race. It's just not possible. But that's the whole point. It creates all sorts of uncertainty and confusion, and we don't know how many people were impacted by this. Maybe not enough to swing the election, but maybe it was enough to swing the election.
I'm going to say something that I want you to remember in case a deep fake comes out 2 days before the election, 3 days or 1 day before the election. Even if it is against Kamala Harris and it is just so juicy that he's like, are you kidding me? There she is with Fidel Castro saying, yeah, we're going to take down the United States of America and make it communist. Do not believe it. Do not believe it in the last couple of days. It is happening. Slovakia, the same thing happened this year. This was an audio recording that was posted to Facebook. On it were two voices, one who leads the liberal progressive Slovakian party and the other from the daily newspaper over there. They appeared to be discussing how to rig the election, partly by buying votes from the country's marginalized Roma minority. Okay? The candidate immediately said, that's not us. This is manipulated tape. This is AI. It's not us. It was posted during a 48-hour moratorium ahead of the polls. This is a moratorium where the press and the candidates are not allowed to say anything. They're not allowed to speak ahead of the polls opening. The media outlets and the politicians are supposed to be silent. That meant, under their rules, the post couldn't really be widely debunked. It was all over the media, but no one could say anything about it. Even if you could say something about it, 2 days is not enough to reduce the damage. Especially, honestly, if it came out against Donald Trump, because the press isn't going to do that anyway. It would rely on people that know how to tell the difference between a deep fake and not a deep fake. And I don't have that expertise. Do you?
No.
Yeah.
Now, what's really important about this, especially as it pertains to Donald Trump, is that the left, and this is a big theme of this book, is that the left elites, they're constantly preparing for all these different crazy scenarios that could happen, not just deep fakes, but all sorts of things. And then they use those golden opportunities, as Prince Charles once talked about with COVID, to reset the world. This is what they do. Well, when it comes to deep fakes, we know that they're wargaming this out. We know it. We talk about it in the book. We outline all of the things that they're doing. They held a huge event called the Deepfake Dilemma earlier this year, where they prepare for they got all these former government officials together and Democrats and people in the media. Alex Witt from MSNBC was there, and they held this event to wargame out what happens, hypothetically, if a deepfake benefiting Donald Trump, produced by Russia, occurs just before the election showing election fraud, but there really isn't election fraud, or telling voters in a swing state the wrong time or place to vote. How are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? And their solution to it was, we need to set up a network of trusted experts that you can go to if you're a local election official in the event of a deepfake crisis, so that you can talk to us and we'll tell you what the right answer is to these problems. All of the people involved in this are crazy anti-Trump and scary anti-Trump. One of the main people is a guy named Miles Taylor. Do you remember him, Stu?
Yeah. He was their Trump aide at one point, wasn't he?
Miles Taylor was the... he was in the he was the chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
When he was in the Trump administration, he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times anonymously saying, I'm the resistance inside, I'm the leader of the resistance inside the Trump administration. Then he wrote a book anonymously about it. And then he wrote another book, not anonymously, admitting this is that he was the guy all along. He's a big hero on the left because he was working inside the government in the national security
to thwart the duly elected president of the United States. They have no problem, as we have now seen, with coups. They have no problem with it.
And he's one of the leaders of these people who are preparing for this crisis that might break out at any moment. So what happens if this does occur? Even if it's a deepfake that doesn't matter, our local election officials are being trained to go to people like that for the answer to the question at the final hour. Well, do you trust that? I certainly don't trust Miles Taylor and people like that to have the right answer.
Nope.
This could potentially be, and we don't know. Maybe no deepfake crisis happens, but if it does, this is incredibly disturbing. I mean, talk about unrest, talk about people questioning the validity of the election if something like this happens. The thing I am most worried about is this.
And you might think, well, we're so close to the election. It's no. This is when that happens. This is one of the reasons we release this book right on top of the election, because there's things in it you need to know right now. And I didn't want to risk you forgetting about it. Deep fakes are really important and very destructive and have already happened in this election cycle with massive ramifications in other countries. 4 billion people voted this year. And several places, several countries, deep fakes have been used to sway the election in the opposite direction just days before the election. Be very, very careful.